Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome in, everybody. It is Wednesday here on Sports Daily, and I guess everywhere, not just Wednesday here. I'm Jacob Albracht alongside Tommy Castor. Jad Chambers producing for us, manning that IHOP hotline for you at 869-1240. It's wide open today. Your calls. I start things off. K-State, KU fans, are you concerned at all about the basketball you watched last night? Neither team covered, but they both got wins. We'll get into each of those games and look ahead to the Shockers playing tonight in a stretch of games for Wichita State that should be really interesting. More on that in just a bit. We'll give away some HTO coffee today. Lots of fun stuff to do for you on the program today. Your calls. How are you, Tommy? Good morning.
I'm good. It was a busy night of basketball last night. You know, both of those games were on ESPN Plus, and so it was kind of easy to switch back and forth between them. They were both going on at the same time. I know we're going to get into both of those matchups last night, but it was definitely an interesting night of basketball.
It was. It was confusing a little bit. I think, you know, I can't imagine there were a lot of people that, you know, bet KU minus 38.5. But, you know, the player props were all good as far as bets last night because all the star players sort of showed out in that game and in the K-State game, quite frankly. But, you know, as far as like expectations on lines and things, that should have been a blowout for KU. K-State ended up winning by 10, but it took overtime. Now, their line wasn't as bad. It was 13. So Oral Roberts was, you know, respectable, at least according to that and in comparison to K-State. I think, Tommy, we begin with KU. Look, K-State got to win at home in overtime against Oral Roberts. I don't know how much concern there is there. We'll get into the Cats and what we saw last night. But when we're talking about concern, it's probably, I mean, go all the way back, Tommy. I thought you thought I was crazy for being concerned at all in the preseason. And then I thought I was crazy after they started, you know, really hot and beat Kentucky. Now I don't think I was crazy. Like, there's something still off about this team, and it was there in the very early stages of this team being together, and it's still there now. They are not close to what we think they can and quite frankly, what I think they should be by the time this all counts.
I think there are a few things to keep in mind after the game last night and watching the Jayhawks. Number one, they've got some issues in shot creation. I mean, outside of feeding the ball to Hunter Dickinson, where else is the shot coming from? I mean, I know Kevin McCullough is probably the best all-around player on that team for Kansas, but they've got an issue, and it happened throughout the game last night where they had a hard time getting shots created. And you know what? Here's the other thing I'm going to point out, and I think that this can bring up a little bit of a discussion when it comes to DeJuan Harris. I love DeJuan Harris. He is a veteran. Yeah, he's got all of these skills that Bill Self loves. And we've talked about it as the season has progressed about how he's, I don't know if he's reluctant to take a shot or, just doesn't really, that's not really what he's doing right now, is shooting the basketball.
Stubbornness.
The problem with that, early in the season, we were, I remember he posted on social media saying, well, I'll shoot when I need to shoot, all of that. Well, the problem is, and Eastern Illinois, I think, did a really good job of understanding this and combating this last night, was they dared DeJuan Harris to shoot the ball, and they basically took defenders away from him. And what that did was, I mean, it really creates issues in spacing. It creates issues in shot creation when you've got two guys on Kevin McCullough, or you can have, an extra guy to double team Hunter Dickinson in the post because you're not defending DeJuan Harris because he's not shooting the basketball. That becomes a little bit of an issue. So, I'm not suggesting that DeJuan Harris needs to go out there and shoot the ball like crazy every single game, but at least, stay dangerous to a point to where the other team knows they need to put a man on you.
He's a good enough shooter that he needs to be taking 2 to 3 3-pointers in every game. At least to my, amateur scouting eye, it's a problem that Nick Timberlake has not taken the role that they chiseled out for him. But yeah, DeJuan Harris needs to shoot a little bit. He took 4 shots last night.
He doesn't need to shoot a lot.
3.
Just needs to shoot enough to, keep the
pull defenders
honest.
out.
That's all you got to do.
He's got to pull defenders out. I think for me, what's embarrassing about the game yesterday, like, you cannot get out rebounded by Eastern Illinois when you have Hunter Dickinson and KJ Adams on the roster and Kevin McCullough. Can't do it. Can't happen. I mean, those 3 guys have to combine for more than 19 rebounds. Dickinson obviously did his share, right? 13 rebounds. He is the Tim Duncan of college basketball. Just mark it down for his production. But KJ Adams and Kevin McCullough combining for 6 rebounds. Like that is a problem coming against Eastern Illinois, because what's going to happen when they play UConn later this week, or they get into the Big 12? I mean, they're just going to get hammered. They have got to get more physical and rebound the ball. And I know Bill Self talked about that after the game last night, and it was a point of emphasis in our KU insider Shreyas Lada's reporting after the game. But I mean, my goodness, we talk about Wichita State not needing to get out rebounded with those 2 big guys in these early games. KU absolutely cannot get out rebounded by Eastern Illinois. It can't happen. And that to me is probably pretty easy, hang it on the bulletin board type stuff for Bill Self. But I mean, for real, like, if that happens against UConn, it's not going to be pretty. Like, one, you can't give they're going to be a good enough defensive team this year that those second chance points for the opposition are going to be killer. How many 13 offensive rebounds for Eastern Illinois. KU should, I mean, it should be insanely difficult for the opposition to get an offensive rebound. They're going to be too good defensively. Don't waste that good defense by giving up offensive rebounds. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff going on here. Like, they don't have the shooter stepping up, which is I think the most glaring and the one that you pointed out. I think the rebounding is a problem. It's just not there yet. And I'm not sure that it has been there. Like, if we look back at this season, the Kentucky win was awesome because I think Kentucky is going to be really good. But, like, for real, let's go all the way back. You lose a game in Bahamas. I don't know what to make of that because there were pros on that team. And then we get the reports that Late Night in the Fog was meh, right? And Bill Self wasn't happy about it. And then they kind of get pushed around in the Illinois exhibition game. Well, it's an exhibition. What do we really make of that? Well, I don't know. And then they get the 3 cupcakes and do pretty good. And then they don't beat Chaminade by as much as they're supposed to. And then Marquette really kind of pushes them around. They bounce back in, and I thought, a nice way against Tennessee. And then yesterday was just like a shake your head at, like, what was that? And, they get UConn at home. I don't know what the line on that's going to be, but I'm not real comfortable with that game right now. Knowing UConn's, history and typical identity, I just, like, KU's got a lot of work to do.
Well, I think that, early in the season, there were a lot of individual performances that KU hung their hat on, whether it was Hunter Dickinson going for double doubles, or Kevin McCullough going for triple doubles. That's really, I think, what the Jayhawks have leaned on early in the season, those individual performances. And, Hunter Dickinson had a great individual performance last night too, 25 and 13, pretty solid, right? But really outside of that, you're not seeing a balanced attack. And I shudder to think what this team would look like if they hadn't have landed Hunter Dickinson in the transfer portal during the offseason. They wouldn't have had, hardly anything to hang their hat on outside of Kevin McCullough. And that wasn't even a given that he was coming back, when the season ended last year. So I think that I'm not as concerned. I don't have that level of concern that you do, because again, we're still in the month of November. There's a long way to go. They do get the defending national champions on Friday, and that's going to be a heck of a game. But I do think it's going to be important, and Bill Self is a master at this, getting his team to shake things off after a game when it really wasn't very good and get them ready for the next game. And I actually think that, I think you maybe mentioned this, that the performance that they had last night may actually have been a good thing bulletin board wise for Bill Self to get his team up and ready to go on Friday.
Yeah, I mean, it's good in the sense that you have a lot to work on, right? Like there's a lot to take into consideration. Look, I've got money as for KU as a champion. Like, don't misunderstand level of concern. Do I think they can fix it? Of course I do. But I do think we're past the point of just saying, they'll be fine. You know what I mean? Like, they'll be all right. I don't like they need to show us that they'll be all right.
I think they will be. I think it's just a matter of there are a couple of things that still need to be developed. And again, there's no team in America that at the end of November, that's the team that we're going to be looking at in February or March. There's no team in America.
I agree. I agree with that. But don't you think this team, right, with the three guys that they bring back, basically you bring back 60% of your starting lineup. And by the way, those guys are like not just a little bit experienced. They're three of the most experienced players in the country. And you add probably the Naismith winner. Like if we're just looking at it right now, things should be going better than they are. Now, will they eventually be going good?
They have probably one loss on the season. What do you mean? Like, things could be going better than they are. They have one loss, and that was to a Marquette team that's a top 5 team in America.
Yep. But you're ignoring the warning signs we saw before the season started, and you're acting like they played well last night. They lost. Illinois beat their
in an
butts.
exhibition game. In an exhibition game.
I want you to look at the box score of that exhibition game and look at the minutes played of that exhibition game. Okay. The starting 5 played that entire game and they got their butts kicked. It wasn't like they were out there running out, Jamari McDowell and all these freshmen for extended minutes. They weren't. The starters played that entire game.
But look,
and they got their butts kicked.
You're pulling a Chicken Little. Sky is falling right now, and
I'm not saying the sky is falling.
I'm not, because of the people that you just mentioned, the presumptive Naismith winner, the returners, the veterans. Now, is it perfect? Absolutely not. They did not play well last night at all. It's not perfect. You are rarely, if ever, going to see a perfect game put together by a team. That doesn't happen. There's always going to be things.
A perfect game? It wasn't even close to perfect. It was a bad game.
I know it wasn't, but what I'm saying is that they've got, number one, the best coach in America, and number two, veterans and the best player in college basketball. I'm not concerned about whether or not they're going to get it figured out. I think that they will. I know that they will. So right now, I don't have a level of concern. They are still a top 5 team in America. They have one loss. Sure, they didn't look good last night, but let's talk about it again early next week after the UConn game. If they lay an egg against UConn, okay, at that point, let's start to have a conversation. There is always a non-conference game for the Jayhawks where they kind of lay an egg and you're kind of like, oh, that didn't look very good. And then what do? Like they bounce back. So I'm not concerned right now.
They bounce back well against Tennessee. I'm not, and I don't like, you might be misunderstanding. Like, I'm not sitting here saying, oh my God, that like the sky is falling. KU's not very good. This is not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying I'm concerned that they got pushed around by Marquette, and then they got pushed around last night by Eastern Illinois, and they got pushed around by Illinois. Like, it's time for this team to get tough and bully people like they should, because they should.
I don't disagree with you about that at all. And I'm not trying to, blow over, the concerns and the things that are not good for Kansas, because there clearly are. I talked about DeJuan Harris's reluctance to shoot the basketball. He was 0 of 4 from the field. He had 1 point. I mean, he's your starting point guard, right? And I think he's a phenomenal basketball player. I don't know what's going on with his reluctance to shoot the basketball. They don't have a lot of depth. They don't have really anybody that you feel confident out, maybe outside of Johnny Furphy, who's still developing, that you feel confident coming off the bench.
Well, those are
to give you extended
those
minutes.
are long-term concerns,
those are
right? Like
things
they do need to find depth.
So I'm not trying to glaze over any of that and say that they're not issues. They certainly are. But when you have veterans like McCullough, who has, by the way, back-to-back triple-doubles this season.
He's incredible.
Hunter Dickinson,
he's been
who
really
looks
good.
Incredible also. And Bill Self on the sideline. I just don't have a lot of, major, long-lasting concerns about what happened last night. It was a bad game, a bad outing for the Jayhawks. They were favored by 38.5 points. They won by 8. That's not a good outing at home in Allen Fieldhouse for Kansas. But do I think that lingers? I think that there might be some things that absolutely they need to address. But I don't think that all of a sudden, oh my God, this is terrible and what are we going to do? I'm not in that position yet.
It's all relative, right? It's all relative because KU's expectation is absolutely a national championship this year. So, I think that and the experience they brought back does and probably should, in fairness, eliminate some of the grace you would typically give a team this time of year. Now, they're going to, again, I think that when we're talking about them in February, we won't be having these conversations, but you're baking in some real aggressive, positive thinking there, when what's staring us in the face are some issues right now that keep happening.
Yeah, there are issues, but you know why I'm still willing to extend them grace right now? When was the last time that Bill Self had a true inside-out game for his team? It's been a while. It's been a few years, right? And you think back to even last season, the offense was generated.
The championship year, they had it.
The offense was generated last season by Jalen Wilson, right? And so it wasn't feeding the post like crazy. So they've got to get back to that. They've got Dickinson, and they're doing that. But DeJuan Harris didn't lead the offense in that way last season. He led the offense in a different way last season as the point guard. So there are still things, and again, they're 7 games in.
Well,
there are still things
but remember,
that you've got to.
We pointed it out a lot of times. DeJuan Harris's point total has been indicative to wins for 3 years now. When he scores, they win. Yeah. That's been the case for a long time.
And I was the first one to say, earlier in the show about his reluctance to shoot the basketball. That clearly is something that needs to be addressed. I think it will be because he's a veteran, right? I don't think it's something where you cross your fingers and you say, man, I just hope that he scores. The guy knows what he's doing, and he knows what his game is. It wasn't a good outing last night for DeJuan Harris. 0 for from the field. And again, when you've got defenses that know you're not going to shoot the basketball, they don't have to defend you, right? And so those are clearly things that I know will be addressed moving forward. Again, let's talk about this again after UConn. And if some of those same things exist after UConn and there aren't adjustments that are made to prevent those things from happening after last night's game, then at that point, I think we can have a different conversation. But right now, I'm still not concerned.
So here's why I think I'm not on board with that, because I'm more concerned with what happens in a bad game against Eastern Illinois than I would be in a bad game against UConn.
In a random non-con game.
But we saw a bad game against Marquette. I don't need to see another bad game against UConn to be concerned. We saw it yesterday. We saw it last night. The things that concern us, we saw against Eastern Illinois. So, whatever happens against UConn, I would be less concerned if what happened last night happened against UConn than I am happening at home against Eastern Illinois. It's November. I get it. There's a lot of time, and it's nothing that happens now is that concerning outside of an injury. I totally get all that stuff, but I can't sit here in good faith and ignore what we've seen now multiple times this season and just say, oh, it'll be fine. I want to see it be fine.
No, and again, I'm not trying to glaze over any of these issues. I agree with you that they're there, but do I think that those same issues are going to be present 3 months from now? Probably not. Now
No, they can't be.
outside of the lack of depth, that is something that I think is concerning. And I know that there's been speculation that the Jayhawks may try to find a midseason addition to come in, and I don't exactly know what that looks like. But that is that lack of depth coming from the bench that is concerning. They ran out there 9 total guys, but really only like 8 of them got extended minutes. Parker Brown only had 5 minutes. So, they've got issues there. That's something that could potentially linger as the season goes on. But man, like adjustments will need to be made. They always are. Like that's what basketball teams do in general, right? When you're playing in November, you're seeing what works and what doesn't, and then you're making adjustments as the season goes on. I think the Jayhawks are going to be just fine.
I mean, look, in February, I think there will be too, but it just like we can't keep seeing the same issues happen. A couple of things. One, KJ Adams is working through some stuff that's obviously unforeseen and insanely difficult to deal with. I think, over time, he will be a much bigger factor in the physical nature of the game, in those aspects, in those, stat categories or whatever. The depth is interesting. I think what's hard about it is they don't have like homegrown depth. And so it's going to take some time. And I'm probably a little bit less concerned about that. The concern is injury, of course. But when you're talking about 3 freshmen, battling and learning to become contributors, I think McDowell and Jackson and Furphy have shown enough. Like, not every freshman is Grady Dick, right? Like, those 3 guys have shown enough that I think they'll continue to develop, and that's probably going to provide the depth. I don't want to pile on Nick Timberlake. I don't like piling on any college player, any kid, but he's got to be better because he was the guy they brought in to be that.
Not good.
On twofold. They need a shooter, and they need depth, experience, that kind of thing. He's got to be that, and they're going to have him work through that. So for all the KU fans that, like that, and I hear from them, during these games, like, we got to get him out of there. We got to get him out of there. I almost don't agree with that. You got to let him try to shoot through it. You got to let him try to work through it because he is important. They don't have anybody else to do what he's been brought in to do. It may be Furphy over time, maybe.
Yeah.
And I'm not just saying that because they appear to be 2 white guys that can shoot, right? Like they need that role to exist, and he's the guy that they brought in to make it so he's got to be the guy.
Look, as the non-conference rolls on, I don't care if Nick Timberlake shoots 8 threes in a game. Like, work through it. Like, you got to let him shoot through it because it's going to be that much more essential when you get into the conference schedule. You can't pull him from a game now and cross your fingers and hope that it's going to come around when conference play starts. You've got to let him shoot through it right now.
UConn game comes quick. That's Friday night in that Big East Big 12 battle. And then they'll get a little time to work through it after that. That's the next big one. They bounce back against Tennessee. Let's see if they can do it again. All right. When we come back, we will talk some K-State basketball. Very different expectations create very different reactions to games, I think. So we'll get into K-State. KU fans, you can chime in on the IHOP hotline, 869-1240. You can also leave your comments on our video stream, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch is where you can do that. Lots still to come. We'll get you ready for a shocker game tonight. It's officially college basketball season, everybody. And we love it here on Sports Daily. We'll have some giveaways for you as well. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor, Jed Chambers producing. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily here on KFH. Glad to be with you. Oh, Tommy. All right, so there's KU. We'll get back to that probably. If you want to leave us your comments on KU last night, you can do it on our video streams, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch. You can also hit us on the IHOP hotline at 869-1240. We'll give away some HTO a little bit later in the show. Let's talk about K-State, Tommy. Different sort of feel in a game that was, maybe closer. I think the line was 13. They won by 10, but it went to overtime. And it was tied at halftime and tied in regulation, by the way, which is interesting. I don't, K-State, I don't have a good grasp for what K-State's going to be in the Big 12. They're not going to win the Big 12. Nothing like that is happening with this team this year. Unless it would be a big surprise to me if that happened. Cam Carter continues to be a force on this team. It's been a really nice development. Arthur Kaluma had a big second half. Tyler Perry, though, again in this game, he shot 12 threes. It's going to be his game, clearly. But he picked it up in overtime. He was big. And in the second half, he wasn't great in the first time. We've seen that now several times from him. It'd be nice if he could get off to a better start. And I think in the games that he does that, they've been much better. Day Ames, who's been the great freshman, was not quite as good last night. But, or I don't know what to make of Oral Roberts. They shot it really well from three, 50%. And I think that's what kept them in the game ultimately. They didn't shoot a ton in the second half, though. What did they shoot for three in the second half? Yeah, 0 for 5 in the second half from three. So, it was a great first half for them. They did not shoot it well in the second half. And K-State got a win. I don't know what to I'm glad they got a win, I guess. I don't really know what much else to think about it other than it's good that they won that game when probably they had a chance not to.
I think that's the thing with Tyler Perry is that you have to take the good with the bad a little bit. And the first half was not good for Tyler Perry at all. All 20 of his points came in the second half and overtime. And you mentioned it. He's going to shoot the three. And I think he's got the green light from Jerome Tang to do so. And it's one of those situations where he's going to fire it up. And at least so far this season, it hasn't been great in the first half, but then he kind of finds his stroke and, is able to make it happen late in the game. Cam Carter was awesome. He had a double-double in the game. The steps forward that this guy has taken from last season to this year is remarkable. I think he's the most important player on Jerome Tang's team. He brings that continuity and that consistency. That's one thing that Jerome Tang talked about in postgame is that right now there's not a lot of consistency with the team. You don't exactly know what you're going to get. And I think a perfect microcosm of that is Tyler Perry. But Cam Carter is probably the most consistent out of all the players that are on that team. With the double-double, I think that there's a trust factor that Jerome Tang has with Cam Carter. I think he's noticed and realized that he's taken that step forward and he's going to lean on him. And so I think that, having him be the key integral part of that team and the most important part of that team, the focal point of the team, that's really where they were able to, I think, to pull away in overtime and ultimately get the win. As far as what they look like moving forward, yeah, it took them overtime to beat Oral Roberts. I don't really know what to make of Oral Roberts. They don't have Ace Smith anymore. So I don't exactly know. Isaac McBride returns for Oral Roberts. So, he had a good game last night for them. So I don't exactly know what to make of it. I don't know if it's anything that I'm, super concerned about moving forward. I just think they need to find their footing consistently and be able to play a complete game in the first half and the second half.
But his game right now is just shooting threes. You know what I mean? Like
I'm just talking about in general. They've got to find consistency as a whole from the first half to the second half. They can't. Yeah. He can't shoot. Tyler Perry. If you want to talk about him specifically, you can't have him miss a bunch of shots early and then lean on him late. You got to have him come out of the gate. Cam Carter's the opposite, right? He shot it really well early and didn't shoot it well late. I'd like to see more from the offense be not just shooting threes. Yeah. And I don't, they were 9 for 29. They took 29 threes last night. If you're going to do that, you got to shoot it probably better than 31%. I don't, but again, like, is this team limited in what they're going to do? I think
it's harder for me to have like a hot take on this team because I don't know what the expectation is. Like for KU, it's easier for me because the expectation is to win a dang national championship, right? Like that expectation has been set a long time ago. So we know what we expect out of KU. I have a hard time with it with K-State because I don't know what to expect for. Like I don't know what the expectation should be, and so I'm continuously having a hard time when I watch them play. Like what do I think this team should be? I mean, all I've said from the beginning is I think they should be a tournament team, right? Like that's sort of it. So I don't know what I'm comparing them to. And we didn't know that last year either until we got into the season and saw it, right? And I think that will happen over time with this team too. Like we'll get there with this team. But I don't think this team looks like it's going to be as good as last year's team. I think that's fair. But what does that mean? Last year's team was a Final Four team, right? Like so what are we doing, you know, in our expectations for them? And how does that impact what we have seen? Really, it's been pretty consistent what we're seeing.
Yeah, I think that really, if you want me to try to pinpoint a concern, I think that really one of them, David Gasson only had 1 point, and he was over from the floor in 27 minutes of action. He did add 8 rebounds. That's good, but this is a guy that's averaging 6 or 7 points a game. He's not going to be a major offensive contributor for this team. But, and I know that Arthur Kaluma came off the bench. And I don't exactly know how that's going to work rotation wise with Jerome Tang if Kaluma is a come off the bench guy, or if he is, that was kind of a, early season thing and he'll end up starting. I don't really know. And I don't really necessarily think it matters.
I mean, he
all that
played
much.
more minutes than McNair.
He did
Gasson,
again. So I don't think it really matters all that much, but I do know that if you're going to be David Gasson and you're going to play for 27 minutes, you got to do more than 1 point. You got to, he took 4 shots and missed all of them. You're adding rebounds. That's great. And I understand that, but you got to be a little bit more of a threat that way. And so that might be one thing to keep an eye on moving forward. But man, it's consistency. And Jerome Tang said the same thing in postgame. It's consistency. It's not exactly knowing what you're going to get from this team, not only from one game to the next, but from one half to the next, right? And which guy it's going to be. Is it going to be Tyler Perry in the second half? Is it going to be Cam Carter in the first half? What is that going to look like? I know a big question that we had at the beginning of the season is where is the offense coming from outside of Tyler Perry? I don't have that question anymore. It's Cam Carter. It's absolutely Cam Carter. And it's also Arthur Kaluma. And it looks like he's back pretty healthy now. Played a majority of that game, was 7 of 13 from the field. I don't have a lot of concern about where the offense is coming from. I just wonder about at what point in the game is it coming from? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that it's coming at all.
Yeah.
I thought the Kaluma thing was interesting, and I kind of like it. I like the spark off the bench. It's sort of like what we've seen Paul Mills trying to do with some of his guys at Wichita State, right? I don't mind Kaluma as being that. Because you sort of can take it in waves. I mean, he was really good last night. He was, 20 and 8.
Yep.
He played, more minutes than everybody but Tyler Perry and Cam Carter. So it ended where we'd want to see it end anyway. I don't mind when coaches do that. I kind of like it for some teams, right? For some teams. And I think this could be an example of a team where that could work, at least for now. And maybe it's not what you do later, because I think later in the season, you just sort of hope all your best players can play as many minutes as they can play, right? You start them and you hope that they just keep playing and don't get in foul trouble. And I think Kaluma is going to be capable of doing that. But right now, they do kind of need this because it was Cam Carter early who scored. What did he score? 5 or 8 points right out of the gates. And then he kind of went silent. And then Tyler Perry picked it up big time in the second half, especially late. He had that 4-point play. And then in overtime. And in overtime, they looked fine. It's hard for me because they have, and here's the other part with K-State, and there's some of this with KU too. K-State's got some talented young players that are going to get better over time. Whereas like last year for K-State, right, they leaned so heavy into their 2 seniors and really, like everything flowed through them. That's kind of it looks like trying to happen with Tyler Perry and Cam Carter. But those 2 players are not the same as Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson. They're really good, but they're not those 2 guys. I mean, I think through, what have we played now? 6 games? I think we know that. Naquan Tomlin is missed dearly, I think. So who else steps up? You think Gasson? I'm not sure Gasson's ever going to do that.
I don't think he's going to step up. I just think he's got to do more than
a point. Yeah,
right?
No,
more
I
than
get
a point, right?
I get it. I like Day-Day Ames. I think he ultimately will. I don't want to say third best because Kaluma's really good, but he's going to be one of the guys. I mean, he's going to be a key contributor. But like if we're looking at it, and we think of a starting 5 down the road. Let's say Naquan Tomlin comes back. We hope he does. And you've got Ames, and then Kaluma fills out your 5. If that's your 5, and they're playing pretty well, that's a team that's a team that's going to mix it up in the Big 12, I think, right? But they've got some work to do for sure. They have to, and I'm totally with you. The offense can't be 29 threes. I don't think they're that good a shooting team to do that. I mean, Tyler Perry probably is, but does that feel like is the rest of the team equipped to do that? We certainly didn't think they were before the season started, right? Like we weren't thinking about this as being some just insanely good shooting team. I'd love to be wrong about that, but I don't think that I am. So, maybe get it to where you can shoot 35, 40% from 3 on a smaller number and create some offense. Otherwise, I'm with you on that. And maybe Gasson's I like David Gasson. I don't know. I've had a really hard time with K-State. I'm glad they won last night. I mean, that's sort of what I take away from the game. I'm glad they won last night.
Yeah, I think the only concern with that is if you're limiting what Tyler Perry does. Again, you can't compare him to Marquise Noel. But
I didn't watch Tyler Perry last year, so I don't know if this is who he is.
Think about last season if you had tried to put a lid on Marquise Noel a little bit, right? And said, look, we got to limit the threes we're taking. Stop firing them, whatever.
No, let me clarify.
That's not going to be good for the offense.
I want Tyler Perry firing away.
Yeah.
I have no problem with Tyler Perry firing away. I'm not sure I want the team as a whole taking 29 threes. I don't know who the other great shooters are. Cam Carter's a pretty good shooter. So if those two combine for 23s in a game, that's a lot though. I would love to see a more variety in maybe Tyler Perry's offense. I don't know. I would have to defer to somebody who watched a lot of Tyler Perry right before he came over to know exactly. I just know he was a really good player, right? But outside of like looking at his stats, like I didn't watch North Texas play last year. I don't know how good he was and what he did. I just know the numbers were there, right? And obviously we all know he's a good shooter, one of the best in the country. We'll see. K-State, up next for K-State, by the way, is
North Alabama.
They get the Villanova game, which is next week. That's the one I think to get excited about. That'll be a good. Villanova's pretty dang good. That will be, because it's in Manhattan. That's a really good opportunity for K-State for us to really get a good grasp of what this team is, because Villanova will bring it. That's a big time game. That's probably. I mean, what did they do? They had the Miami game, right? That was a big one too, and they fared well. If they fare well against Villanova, after a good performance against Providence and a good performance against Miami, I don't know if it was a good performance against USC. It was the first game of the year. I think we'll feel pretty good. We'll get North Alabama out of the way, but Villanova, LSU, and Nebraska before Wichita State. We're going to talk about how fun the next portion of the Wichita State schedule will be. It's going to be a pretty fun portion of the K-State schedule, too. 869-1240, your thoughts on it. We'll come back. We'll wrap up hour number 1. Shocker talk coming in the second hour. We'll look into this Richmond game. It's a Wednesday, everybody, and it is college basketball. Man, isn't this great? We get all this college basketball to talk, and it's not even December yet. This is fantastic. We'll be back with more Sports Daily right after this. Welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily here. Happy birthday to my oldest. 9 years old today.
Wow. Happy birthday, Addie.
It's so funny how right our elders were when we were kids. Like, this goes so dang fast and it's absurd. And now you get like these Facebook memories, which are maybe the greatest thing about Facebook and social media in general when you're a parent is to get those back. It's nuts, man. And it's sad and it's exciting and awesome all at the same time. And like, I get it. It is terrifying thinking about, a kid getting close to those years where life gets pretty hard. Let's be real. And like not being able to hold their hand through it. And then like we just keep joking with her, like we'll just be crying all day long because you do. Like it's just crazy. Can't believe I have a 9-year-old.
You are you're halfway through her, moving out to college, right?
Don't say that.
Halfway.
Yeah, don't say that.
And you're not that far away. You're only a few years away from maybe like the first boyfriend and like all of that.
She can. We tell her all the time. she can live with us until she's 40. Like you'll be
Yeah.
fine. You don't need to, I'm definitely not a helicopter parent. I'm very much the opposite. Like figure it out on your own. That's the way my parents were. And you kind of don't know anything else, but man, it's tough.
Are you going to be that
shotgun
dad? Like, you meet the boyfriend while cleaning the shotgun out kind of thing.
Yep. I don't have a gun right now, but I need one
Yep.
for that reason, among others. But yeah, for sure. It's hard. I had 4 older brothers, right? So I don't have any perspective. My wife only has a sister that she lived with for the most part. She has some half brothers, but like we have very different perspectives on all of this, and much of it I will have to defer. Like it's not a joke. Like I try to explain to her, like I didn't know a lot of things about girls until I was like in high school, like certain things like that, if you have a sister or whatever, you just kind of know about. Like my son will be fine with 2 older sisters. I'm telling you, like there are things where people would like make jokes and I'm like, like no clue what anybody's talking about. I knew nothing about girls. So I only know about boys and I know how boys are. So that's the only perspective I have. And that's going to be a hard perspective to bring to the teenage years of a girl other than, yes, sit on the front porch with the shotgun. Because in my head, that's all that matters, right? Like because one-track minds. I know boys, one-track minds. Like that's it. And so how do you counter a one-track mind? Like you touch the oven to find out it's hot, right? Like, so that's all I know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fortunate. I've only got 2 boys and we're done having kids. So I'm not going to have that perspective of girls, but I know what's going to happen with you though, is that your girls are going to become teenagers. And at some point you're going to grab your son. You're going to say, buddy, we got to get out of here for a while. Like, let's go between the 2 girls and mom and all of that. Like, we got to get out of town for a while.
Yeah. Or my son I just need him to be really big. Like, and son, this is what needs to happen. Like, you almost like, I need you to take care of this for me. Because daddy will go to jail. 869-1240 is the number to call. On the way out here, as we get things going in hour number 2, let's give away some HTO coffee. We still got a little snow on the ground. Beat that stuff back with some hot coffee or iced coffee, which is, all the rave right now for everybody is the iced coffee. We got it all at HTO. You can get those brew house drinks at either the Wichita East location or in Derby. And you can get your hands on a couple free ones right now by calling the IHOP hotline at 869-1240. When we come back, we'll start off hour number 2 with a little Wichita State Shocker basketball talk. A lot of chatter about the Panthers and Bryce Young and whether he's the guy, and he's getting questioned. We'll talk about that as well. Maybe a little bit premature and unfair, but we'll get into it as we make our way through Sports Daily on a Wednesday.
Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome back in, everybody. Hour number 2 underway here on Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor alongside you for the ride. Jet Chambers producing. The IHOP hotline is open at 869-1240. By the way, can't get enough Chiefs content. Check out Fansided's Arrowhead Addict, a Kansas City Chiefs podcast for free on the Odyssey app. Follow Arrowhead Addict on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. We've talked about KU. We've talked about K-State. Happy to jump back into either of those who played games last night. We can do that on the IHOP hotline. Let's talk a little shockers here, Tommy. We get Richmond tonight here at Charles Koch Arena. They're going to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Charles Koch Arena tonight. I know the snow hampered maybe some Shocker fans' plan to get out to a game over the weekend against Norfolk State. This will be a good one. This is the best home game we'll have so far this season. Richmond's at 80 right now in the Ken Palm. They look pretty good out of the Atlantic 10. Should be a good contest, good test. I mean, for me, and I know that Wichita State's 107 right now in the Ken Palm, but you get Richmond at home. This is the kind of game we need to see Wichita State win. Like, this is the caliber of, opponent that we need to see Wichita State beat. When you look inside the Ken Palm, and you look at the American Athletic Conference, this is right in the range where you'll see North Texas, who's at 73, right in the range where we'll see SMU, who's at 86. Tulane right now is at 99. Wichita State's right there. So you've got, and Charlotte's at 123. So you've sort of got this range now of, I think, what should be, and I called it a measuring stick on TV last night. And, FAU and Memphis are much higher in the rankings. But when we're talking about Wichita State and what we, need to see from them this year, if we want them to finish, near the top, if not better, of the AAC, this is the caliber of opponent they're going to need to be able to beat to accomplish that, and especially at home. So when we look at this Richmond game, Tommy, it feels like that kind of game to me. Like, it feels like this is about the type of team we'll see in the American on the top end this year.
Yeah, don't you think that this is probably the best litmus test so far in the early season for Wichita State? I mean, like you mentioned, Richmond is 80 in the Ken Palm. Where was Liberty at? Was Liberty, when they played in Myrtle Beach,
Liberty was much high
up there.
They were... Yeah, I think they were higher at the time, and I'm almost certain they are.
Okay,
now.
so
they're inside the top 40
39.
now. They're at 39.
They're at 39 right now.
I think they were higher even than. Well, no, I do think they were higher, a little bit higher when they played Wichita State. Liberty's good. Yeah. I mean, I don't think Richmond's as good as Liberty.
Yeah.
And maybe Liberty's a better look at what maybe like FAU and Memphis will be. But if Wichita State's going to finish third. Right. So if that's fair, if that's what we want to see, like maybe if we're being reasonable and we say, okay, maybe not FAU or Memphis this year, but there's not another team in the AAC that we should be thinking about better than Wichita State right now. This is probably about right for the team, especially at home. Like, this is good. This is just right. It's just the right timing in the season. It's good.
And we had kind of been waiting on Kenny Poto to take a step forward early in this season. And, not that he hadn't played well early on. I mean, he played fine, but he had 25 points against Norfolk State their last time out. And so, that makes me think that maybe he's broken out a little bit. I don't think we can expect necessarily 25 points against Richmond tonight, but I do think that, having him be assertive and take over the game in that way is going to be important for Wichita State. The thing about Richmond, they've got a 7-footer by the name of Neil Perry, who is really good, averages over 14 points a game. And so they're going to have to battle that. They're going to have to be ready defensively. With Kenny Poto, Quincy Ballard, the bigs, they're going to have to really work on defending him well in the post tonight, because he's going to be the guy that I would imagine Richmond is going to lean on quite a bit for their offense. Rebounding, of course, is going to be extremely important for the Shockers. And I think it's been so much fun to watch the way Colby Rogers has emerged and kind of come out as the offensive leader for Wichita State early in this season. And so, a good shooting night from Colby, I think, is going to be essential as well. But I'm with you. I do agree that this is going to be a good test, I think, for Wichita State and a good early look on what a lot of their opponents in the American might look like once we get into conference play.
Yeah, and so it's not just this one either. So you got Richmond. Missouri had a really bad loss. So I don't know what to make of Mizzou. It's going to be tough on the road. South Dakota State and Southern Illinois. And I ran this last night, and I don't remember off the top of my head. So let me just look them up. South Dakota State's 136. Southern Illinois is right 138. So you've got those two games, which is, again, there's going to be a lot of American teams in that range. And then, of course, K-State and KU are going to be much higher. And so you get this stretch of games here where every opponent, Tommy, to me, over the next 6, and it's easy to say December, but technically Richmond, of course, falls today, which is still November. But it's this finish to the non-con where we're going to see 6 games, and I think these 6 games represent the AAC pretty well. You'll have, top-end teams with Richmond. You'll have mid-tier teams, and maybe Mizzou fits the top end. I'm not sure. You'll see the middle tier sort of in South Dakota State and Southern Illinois, and then you'll see the top end, K-State and KU. So you sort of get this variety of what the conference will probably bring at Wichita State, and let's see how they fare. You look at the only true road game in that stretch is the Missouri game. The Richmond and Southern Illinois games are true home games. South Dakota State's at Intrust, and then K-State and KU are both at the T-Mobile Center. So I cannot wait to see these 6 games. I mean, I think they need to win at least 3 of them. I'd like to see them win more than that. I definitely don't want to see them win fewer than that. But I think as we make our way to, and they open the conference against North Texas on January 4th, I think, Tommy, by January 4th, we're going to have a pretty good idea of what expectations we should set for the Shockers in the AAC.
Yeah, I think 4-2 in this next 6-game stretch is probably. I think you would take that if you're a Shocker fan. I think that
that means you win them all except for K-State and KU. I mean,
well. Look, I think that probably you chalk up Kansas as more than likely a loss. I would imagine, but then. I think that if you split between Kansas State and Missouri, like you get one of them, I
think Kansas State's going to be tough. I think Missouri's winnable. I think Kansas State's going to be tough.
Yeah, it's always difficult
for the Shockers.
It's always difficult to try to apply the transitive property, like this team beat this team, so this team beat that team.
Totally.
But I will say that Missouri played Memphis earlier in the season and lost by 15. So, and I don't exactly know.
And they just had a bad loss at home.
Yeah, to Jackson State. They lost at home to Jackson State, which was not good at all for the Tigers. But they got beat by Memphis by 15. So if you are kind of comparing where you would think Wichita State stacks up in the American compared to Memphis, then I do think it might be a toss-up game with Missouri.
I agree. I totally agree. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that it's definitely a winnable game with Missouri. I think Kansas State is winnable as well. I don't think that it's not going to be a cakewalk, but I do think it's winnable for Wichita State. I think that Richmond tonight is winnable for sure. San Diego State, Southern Illinois, and then you're trying to get one of either Missouri or Kansas State.
I'm behind the 8 ball. I haven't even looked at the line tonight. Give me just a second. We'll take a quick look at that because I'm curious to see. Shockers by 4. I would have guessed, Tommy. I was just going to say, and this is, I'm not making that. I was going to say, I bet the Shockers are favored by 4.5. They're favored by 4 right now against Richmond. That feels right to me. I think they need to win the game tonight. I mean, I do. If they don't win the game tonight, then you're looking at a stretch. And look, all of these things are for us to ponder, right? The reality is inside the program, it's like you really are taking things one game at a time right now. I mean, it's not we have fun with this stuff. They're not in there looking at this and like, oh, okay, over the night. No, they're not doing that. They don't have time for that. That's for us to do, but we will, and it's fun. And it's how we try to evaluate and come up with expectation, which we took a lot of heat for saying, the second Isaac Brown was gone, that the expectation needs to be at least what Isaac Brown has done. Right. And some people thought that was ridiculous, but I think it's logical. And so, in order to do that, in order to then be a top 5-ish team in the league, I agree with you. They need to be able to beat Richmond. They need to be able to beat Missouri.
Yeah.
Now that's a road game. So we do need to point that out, that it is a road game at Mizzou. But based on what we've seen so far, Missouri doesn't seem insurmountable. Certainly South Dakota State and Southern Illinois, Wichita State will be favored, and then they won't be favored against Kansas State or Kansas. I think Kansas State is a bit much right now. Now, if they blow through these next 4 and look really good, I may come around to your way of thinking. Kansas State, I think, is going to be tough for them, but it could be. When you think about Kansas State's, and I don't know that are we saying Tyler Perry's their best player? I mean, supposed to be.
I think so.
He was a player in the American last year, so we will see. And he was a player in
North
a
Texas
team that is now in the American. You know what I mean? He was, North Texas now in the American, was not in the American last year, but I can't. Like, I've been waiting for the Shockers all year. Like, I cannot wait for this stretch of games because it will give us a better idea of what to expect in the American. Because right now, I think it's hard to, it's hard for K-State. It's hard for Wichita State too to really understand what we want this team to be.
Well, and look, I think I took some heat, and this was after the first game of the season, by saying what I saw from them after they played Lipscomb is a team that could compete for an American Conference title this season. Yeah. I don't think that's really out of line. I mean, honestly, right now it's Florida Atlantic, it's Memphis, and then it's probably Wichita State right there. I think that
I haven't seen Memphis, but I've seen Florida Atlantic. They're really good. They are good.
They are really good. And you know what, Memphis, they didn't they stumble recently? Didn't they have a bad?
I haven't.
They played Villanova. They lost by 13 to Villanova.
Okay. I'm okay with that.
On Friday, right? So they've played some tough opponents. They played Arkansas, they played Michigan, like some high profile opponents, but they lost by 16 on Friday to Villanova, a top 25 team. So look, I think that Wichita State is right there. I think that, and we're going to have a good look after the next 6 games, right before we get in to conference play. I think at that point, you can have some pretty solid expectations on where they finish. Are they the 3rd best team in the American right now? I think they probably are. But again, the next 6 games are going to tell us a lot.
So by Ken Palm right now, so again, these are just metrics. And again, they're early season metrics, and don't scoff at them because we know now that Paul Mills loves to look at this too. So Florida Atlantic, Memphis are 1-2, then North Texas, SMU, Tulane, then Wichita State. So the metrics right now have Wichita State as the 6th best team in the American. Now, of course, you have to play these games out, right? And I don't think anybody's going to sit here right now and think Tulane's better than Wichita State. That's just what all the, adjusted offense and adjusted, all the stuff that goes into the Ken Palm. So, are they the 3rd best team? I think there's I think, right now, absolutely, they are they should be in the conversation with North Texas and SMU and I guess Tulane, Charlotte and UAB down there. Like, no, they need to be better than those teams. And so for me, like, should they be the 3rd best team in the league? I think that's a reasonable expectation. I think it certainly was when the hire of Paul Mills was made. Now let's see how they actually stack up, and we'll see these games be played. That's why I'm so excited about it. It's like, are we okay in that expectation and what it should be, and it being disappointing if they're not there, I guess, right? Like, because you got to have a baseline, and I just don't know where to set the baseline yet. But I think based on what we've seen, our baseline has always been fair, right? They just need to be better than they were a year ago.
And with the American losing Houston and Cincinnati, and the teams that they lost in the conference, if you're projecting ahead and you're looking at the NCAA tournament, I mean, how many teams realistically are going to get a bid from the American in the NCAA tournament? Obviously, the conference champion, then maybe one other team. It's maybe a 2-bid league. Maybe right now, right?
I think it looks like a 2-bid league right now.
So I think my point on that is you've got 6 games coming up. Now, of course, Liberty, we already mentioned, they are in the top 40 in the Ken Palm. If they stay there, that's gonna be a good matchup. That's gonna look like mean, I hate saying a good loss, but that's going to look like a better loss, right? You're losing to a team that's currently top 40 in KenPom, but you've got a stretch of 6 games coming up where, not all of them are high profile necessarily, but, Kansas State, Missouri, you've got some high profile matchups that if Wichita State doesn't win the league, I'm not suggesting that these games are going to be the difference maker on whether or not they get an at-large bid in the NCAA tournament. But if you can get a couple of notable wins, or even a couple of like a quad 1 loss to Kansas necessarily, like if you add that in there, come tournament time and come resume building time, this next stretch of 6 games, I think we can look back on whether or not it makes or breaks a potential tournament bid for Paul Mills' team.
Yeah, tournament bid. Look, they could have a resume that gets them into the tournament. Right, they could without winning the tournament, but that's going to take some magical things happening over the next 6.
Yeah,
right. I think
that's why
just
I'm saying
trying
you could look back on this stretch,
sure,
in the next couple of months, like this is where this is really where.
But I guess the question about that becomes: does that like take a win over Kansas?
Wow.
To get that, I'm not
even
sure.
If you lose that, though, I mean that's a quad 1 loss, right? It should be a quad 1 loss.
It will be a quad 1 loss, on a neutral court.
Yeah.
Almost certainly will be a quad 1 loss. All that stuff. Look, what sucks is we don't get to say it's tournament or bust for Wichita State yet. It's what I want to say. It's what I want this to be every year. I don't know if it's fair to have it there yet this year. I don't think we've seen enough from this team. In fact, I know it's unfair. This isn't the team where it's like, oh, this is tournament or bust. It's not. Could they get there? Sure, they could. But I don't think that should be the expectation. I think the expectation for now, and I've said this for a while, is top 5 in the American, but I want to say it's top 3, right? Like that's what I want to say the expectation should be. Right now, I think that's not quite fair yet. I think that there have been some circumstances that have throttled the upside of this team through players not being able to play. And so let's go with top 5 for now still. And we're going to see every team in the next 6 games be basically at that level, right? Of what I think we'll see probably. Like if we look back at the American and its 5 best teams, I'll bet you that the teams we see them play with maybe the exception of Southern Illinois, will be in that same range of the top 5 teams we're going to see when the dust settles on the American. So this is it. And only one of these games is a true road game, right? And don't think those Kansas City games are road games. There are going to be tons of Shocker fans at both of those games. And Intrust Bank Arena is, I would say it's a home game, except the Shockers have, not always fared particularly well at Intrust Bank Arena.
Hasn't always been great.
Maybe it's not. Yeah, and I get it. Like, it's hard to shoot in those arenas. It's going to be the same thing at T-Mobile. Like, you go into those bigger arenas, and it's just, like, it's totally different than what you're used to. So I can't wait for it. We've got the game for you over on KYN. Of course, tonight pregame coverage begins at 5:30. I'm most excited for a Shocker game this year, Tommy. It is for me. I don't know about you, but this is, easily to me the most excited I've been for a Shocker game all year long.
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty locked into Myrtle Beach. I felt like, especially that game against Liberty, that was a big time test.
It was a bad performance. That's why I tuned out. I was like,
but no, I think that, a home game, Charles Koch Arena, a Wednesday night game, you're playing a team in Richmond that, they've got some talent. They've got some really talented players, including the 7-footer Neil Perry, that they're going to have to defend and have their hands full with him. Sure. I mean, I'm definitely up for this game, and I think it's going to be a really good test for them.
Here we go. 5:30. Coverage begins tonight on KYN. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll take a brief pause, from college basketball. We're at almost an hour and a half in here, and we've been going college basketball. I want to talk about this Mark Cuban story, and I want to maybe get into the Bryce Young thing, but I'm more interested in Cuban. Let's hit that next on Sports Daily. All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily here on KFH. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor with you. Chad Chambers with us. He's got that IHOP hotline ready for you at 869-1240 if you want to chime in. We've been talking all college hoops, reviewing two spooky games last night for KU and K-State, looking ahead to Wichita State tonight. Let's turn it around. I guess this is a pro basketball conversation, more of a is it a pop culture conversation? I don't know what it is. Mark Cuban's selling his majority stake in the Mavericks. I've seen all kinds of reaction to this. He also announced he was leaving Shark Tank. So you've got like doomsday economists saying, see, look, it's a sign of the times. Everything's going to crash. The world's on fire. You've got people saying, oh, he's going to run for president. You got all kinds of stuff being tossed out there. I think at the minimum, he just made tons of money on an investment. He retains basketball control. He's been telling us, I think, for about a year now that, you know, the Mavericks at some point are basically going to be playing inside some massive like resort casino facility. He sold the team, Tommy, to casino people. I'm guessing here that, yeah, there may be other things that happen because of this, but I think at the minimum, like these people offered him a ton of money. He gets to do all the fun parts about this still, which is retain basketball control. And at some point, yes, Texas will eventually get gambling. These casinos are going to just flood into that state. And yeah, the Mavericks will probably be a big part of some mega like casino gambling's coming to Texas. The Vegas lobby's done a really good job of keeping it out thus far. It's coming though. It's funny. You go to Vegas and you still like most of the people you see there are from Texas. Because that's just where I would laugh that when I was 21, I went there and I'm like, man, everybody here's from Texas. What's going on? And then I get it. But I don't know what to make of all this. No, I don't think he's doing this because he thinks everything's going to come crashing down. Maybe he'd be running for president. I think that's still quite a long shot. I think it's more of just like, you know, like that's too good of an offer to like, you don't have to deal with all the boring stuff. Now you get all the money and you just get to retain basketball control anyway. That's awesome.
Well, and on top of that too, I mean, it wouldn't be a casino family buying the team. if there wasn't
Right.
the future of gambling in the state of Texas. Like, this telegraphs it's going to happen at some point. Sports wagering and
Sure
casinos
it
and
is.
all of that. I mean, it's on its way to the state of Texas. I was in Dallas last week over Thanksgiving, and you and I were texting back and forth, and I forgot how frustrating it was that I couldn't bet anything. And like we're talking about, you're sending me screenshots of your parlays that you have and all that. And I'm like, I can't do anything. I'm in Dallas. I can't bet anything right now. So it's coming. It's going to happen. There's too much money to be made in that state when it comes to gambling and sports wagering and all of that. And then let's talk about just the investment and the money, the ROI that Mark Cuban got when he bought the Mavericks from Ross Perot in 2000. He bought him for $285 million. It looks like this deal is valued around $3.5 billion for the Mavericks. So he made a ton of money. And the fact that he's retaining control of the operations, that's kind of unheard of, right? Like, you sell your
That's what I mean.
majority,
You get to do
you
the
sell
fun part.
you sell your majority stake, but you still get to make all the decisions. You made all the money and you get to make all the decisions. I mean, that's a perfect deal for Mark Cuban.
And now you don't have to, decide what color napkins they have in the
Right.
luxury suite. Like, you can buy all of that stuff. Who cares? Where it's just strictly, now it's down to the fun part. It's probably like what Jerry Jones would love to have, right? Like, I don't want to mess with the other stuff. I just want to win a Super Bowl. But he gets to do that. I think that if you've been down there too, and I know you have, like that area between Cowboys Stadium and the new Rangers ballpark, there's a lot of space there. That there, like, to me, I just keep seeing what's already been built there and really cool being attached. Like, it's going to go nuts. And the bigger picture of this story to me wasn't the like, what's Cuban going to do next? It's that we're probably closer to Texas gambling than maybe we think we are. And I don't keep up with that stuff anymore. I don't live there anymore. But that's what I took away from that story. But it is very interesting, and we'll see. Do you imagine Mark Cuban running for president? Like another reality TV star billionaire running for president. Like, that would be interesting. It's too late now. He can't run now, but it would have to be in the next one. I don't know. Like,
I mean, is it too late? Is it too late for this one? I mean, he could declare right away and jump right in and
that's pretty
shake
late.
things up.
Pretty late in the game.
He could.
It's I mean, I guess he could.
Like, I mean, you run as an independent. Yeah, you could jump.
I would
right
like
in there
him to
and
do that anyway.
Yeah.
I joked. You sent me that yesterday. I said I'd love to see like 5 people run, like 5 people that would actually get votes run, like jump in the race. Let's see what happens.
Like the
right?
Rock. You have the Rock and
the Rock,
Cuban.
Jon Stewart, Mark Cuban. Like I don't even care. Like people
Taylor
that actually.
Swift.
Yeah, sure. I don't care. I really don't. Like, whatever it is that like breaks up the system that we have in place. And, maybe we could get some people that aren't senior citizens in the mix just to, I'm no offense to senior citizens. I'm going to be one someday, I hope. Let's just mix it up a little bit, just spice things up a little bit. Let's make this thing interesting. Because right now it looks like it's not going to be that interesting. We kind of know the way this is headed. Maybe not. I don't know.
The thing is, Cuban has been more outspoken. I know this isn't a politics show, but he's been more outspoken in recent years about his viewpoints and opinions and things like that. He's been critical of Donald Trump. He's been critical of Joe Biden. That doesn't suggest that he's jumping into the race necessarily, but he's been a little bit more vocal than what he was in the past. And the other thing too is, like, he looks youthful. He's 65. I mean, he's younger than those two guys.
Well, listen, by comparison.
Right, but what I'm saying is there probably aren't a ton of cycles left for Mark Cuban if he wants to throw his hat into the ring.
At 65, you're just hitting your, your prime for politicians. I
think
they all got about 20 years left.
I was surprised to read that he was 65. I would have put him, I don't know, 5 or 10 years younger than that.
If I was a billionaire, I'm not sure I would look 65 if I was 65 either.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like you can do some things at that point to help not look as old as you do.
You can age pretty quick when you got a lot of money. What did the notorious B.I.G. say? Mo money, mo problems.
It is.
Right?
Yeah. Mark, isn't it Mark? Is it Mark Cuban or Elon Musk? I don't remember. One of the billionaires. That's whatever. Said something to the effect of money. What's the good line? It's something to the effect of money isn't everything, but it makes life a whole lot easier. Like something like that. Like, like, let's be real.
I also want to point out that's probably going to be the only time I ever quote the Notorious B.I.G. on this show. Yeah, I was
I'm
kind
impressed.
of out of place. Kind of out of place.
Yeah, a little. I'm impressed. I'm impressed. Like, is Patrick Mahomes eventually running for president? Like, what are we going to do here? Can we get a poor guy running for president, like a legitimate, like middle class guy, like Steve Johnson, who just works the factory? Like, let's just get like 35 candidates, and let's get this thing mixed up a little bit.
Well, the closest I can remember to that happening though was the Tiger King guy ran for president.
That's
he
true.
did.
Yeah, that's a
good
point.
Yeah.
Joe Exotic.
Maybe
Joe Exotic, yes.
How about non-criminals, non-con men? Like, we got to set some standards here.
If you want like a middle class, like everyman, average Joe, nominate
Joe Lunchpail.
I nominate Jad Chambers. I'm throwing my support behind Jad.
Jad, I need your I'm going to need your, what is it? Your not your campaign, your policy goals, whatever it is you need to do. Like, can we get this 4-day work week thing we've always been hearing about? Can we get that in effect? I don't know.
I think I would be the most scared person that there would be facing a Jad Chambers presidency. Yeah. That would terrify me.
Your campaign slogan is "Please don't vote for me."
Yeah.
Can you just a big picture of Jad's face with? Can you imagine this person pushing the nuclear button?
Yeah.
I could never. The geopolitical piece of being president is something I would never be able to do, and I don't know how people would ever sign up for that. Like, oh, it's fine. The fate of the world and society's in your hands. That's all. Like, that's a pretty daunting task.
I get
maybe Mark Cuban's up for it. I don't know.
I get really angry when I stub my toe. You know what I mean? Like, I'm mad when I do that.
Overreact.
I overreact when I stub my toe. I can't imagine if I was in charge of the free world, how I would overreact about everything.
I have a really hard time with things that I'm not patient. I've said that before, and that feels like a quality that you probably need to have in that position is some patience. That wouldn't be good for me.
You've got another
instant reaction.
Another country's leader doesn't answer the phone right away when you call them, so you bomb them right away.
Why has he not emailed me back?
Yeah.
Like, let's up the ante here. We got to put some pressure on here. I need an answer.
Come on.
I need an answer by 5 o'clock. I don't care if it's after hours.
Scramble
Check
the
your
jets.
Email.
Scramble the jets.
Yeah. I'd be. I'm not cut out for that job. I know that. All right. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, I guess we can get into this Bryce Young thing just because I keep seeing it. Like, are people really ready to pull the plug on Bryce Young now? I mean, I think the Panthers have done some things that maybe have people a little bit squirrely, and I get that. But to me, the Panthers are telling us they're not ready to pull the plug on Bryce Young, and they're going to do whatever it takes to put him in a better position. We'll talk about that next on Sports Daily.
Page.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily here on KFH. It's Albracht and Castor. Chad Chambers producing for us, running for president. He's just got to fill out the paperwork. All right, Bryce Young, Tommy, has jumped to the forefront. Former number one overall pick, right? Get it. And the Panthers fired their coach. They're 1-10 now, 1-9, 1-10.
1-10.
It hadn't been good for Bryce Young. 9 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. In those 11 games, only 1,800 yards. He hadn't been over 250 yards in a game yet this season. His quarterback rating is like 75, which is not good at all. I think that it's too early to call Bryce Young any sort of bust. I don't think it's too early to say the Panthers made a big mistake in not going Stroud or even Anthony Richardson, trading all that they traded. Now, what may not be fair about that is they traded away in that trade what would have been Bryce Young's best weapon in DJ Moore. His line hasn't been very good. But, with his size and all these things that get brought into that, he's always going to have some challenges against a pass rush. I don't know. I think he's wired the right way to work through this. I think as we look at it now, he's certainly in the worst situation of the rookie quarterbacks with the least to work with. But I think I've seen enough to say he's not going to be better than CJ Stroud. And I don't think he's going to be better than Anthony Richardson.
And maybe not, but I think it's way too early to say that he's a bust. He has no team
he's a
around
bust,
him.
But was he a mistake? He
might have been. I mean, he might have been a mistake. Again, nobody knew that CJ Stroud was going to be this revelation this year. I think people thought that he'd be good, right? But I don't think right away on this Texans team, anybody really had a thought that it was going to be this way this season as a rookie for CJ Stroud. Anthony Richardson, everybody said was kind of the most pro-ready quarterback coming into the league as the rookie. And he looked really good before he went down with the injury that ultimately ended his season. But I think that, I made this point on Monday. Bryce Young has nobody around him. The team is not good. Now, Bryce Young hasn't been great, right? But they don't have anybody like the skill position players, like who's running the ball? Chuba Hubbard, who's catching the ball? I mean, your best receiver is Adam Thielen, who's a good receiver, but I mean, I think he's past his prime, right? And so he doesn't really have, the line's not been good. He hasn't had a lot of support around him. And so I think it's too early to say that he's a bust. But one thing the Panthers have to do, and it's going to be difficult because they gave up all this draft capital for the first pick, they've got to try to build a team around Bryce Young to help him out moving forward.
Look, and the other thing is too, they tried, right? They brought in Miles Sanders. He was the, I believe, highest paid running back in free agency. They brought in Adam Thielen, who's been really good and kind of been the safety blanket there. They brought in Hayden Hurst. So it's not like they didn't try to bring players in. They did.
Yeah.
It didn't work, and I don't know how much Bryce Young has to do with that. Their line's not very good. But now the problem you face when you make these kinds of trades is it's going to take some time to build it because they don't have the draft capital to do it.
Right.
And so are you going to just keep trying to hope free agents are going to come? Because if I'm a free agent receiver, I'm not sure that I'm like, yeah, let me go sign up to play Bryce Young right now.
Well, and look, so they lose Frank Reich. They fire him. They fire Josh McCown, who's the quarterback coach. They fire Deuce Staley, who is the running backs coach for the Panthers. It's not really any of their faults, I don't think. I mean,
we've seen that story too many times. That's not good for a young quarterback.
It's not at all. And David Tepper, the owner, said that of course they're committed to developing him and putting him in the best position. What other choice do they have? They gave up all this draft capital to go get him and get the number 1 pick last season to draft Bryce Young. They don't have that pick moving forward for this coming season. The Bears had that pick, right? So they don't have the draft capital to be able to go out and try to even draft a replacement for Bryce Young. So they are committed to him, and it's not good for a quarterback's development when you have to replace a coach. I think back to the Trevor Lawrence situation in Jacksonville. Urban Meyer's the head coach, and it was a disaster. They fire him.
Different though.
They fire him midway through his first season, and it wasn't until Doug Peterson comes in, and now Trevor Lawrence is starting to develop in the right way.
But Frank Reich is Doug Peterson.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's what he's there. He's like it's almost like you saw what Doug Peterson did and you're like, well, let's get Frank Reich because that kind of works. They didn't make the weird hire, the Urban Meyer. They went with the safe hire. That's what's strange to me about making that change. Like, why would you make that change now? It's not like he was toxic or disruptive. It's not working out. So what are you going to do now? And how many different coordinators and everything? Because we know, history has shown us time and time again in the NFL, changing coordinators every year is not the path for a young quarterback. What are you going to do? To me, I think it's obvious at this point. You just go hire Eric Bieniemy and you be done with it. Like, it's time to put all that chatter away. He's proven it now with Sam Howell, who looks good, right? In his first year as a starter. He obviously proved it against Mahomes. And maybe the most glaring example of why, if I were the Panthers, that's what I'd do. Look at the Chiefs offense without him. That's, Matt Nagy. Everybody, Matt Nagy's there. Everything will be fine. Really? What about that situation and the situation with him in Chicago makes us, you look back at that now and you're like, yeah, that probably wasn't very smart of us to just assume that. And Bieniemy all of a sudden is gone. They've struggled without him. And Washington, I know they're not winning all the games they should be winning, but you'd be hard pressed to not say that their quarterback is playing better than you thought he would. And so to me, it gets obvious you do that, but if you do it, you have got to stick with it. You have to.
How many quarterbacks that are really good, historical, legendary, great, or even elite quarterbacks were really bad and on really bad teams in their rookie season? I want to be very clear. I am not comparing Bryce Young to Peyton Manning. They are, night and day different. But remember Peyton Manning's rookie year. It was really, really bad in Indianapolis. He led the league in interceptions that year. He was not good. The team was not good. It took a couple of years. It took the right coach with Tony Dungy coming in. It took a team being built around him. Again, I'm not comparing Peyton Manning to Bryce Young. I don't think that ceiling is that high for Bryce Young. But it's not just about him. The supporting cast around him has not been good. I do think that it was a mistake for the Panthers to fire Frank Reich because I do think that he could have gotten the best out of Bryce Young with the better supporting cast around him. We'll never know that because they fired him and Josh McCown and, basically the entire offensive coaching staff. But they got to get it right this time. They got to make sure that, remember, the Colts went from, who was it, Jim Mora coaching the team when Peyton Manning was there for 3 years. I know, but then they go to Tony Dungy and it's like a match made in heaven. The Panthers have to go and find their Tony Dungy. Easier said than done, I know, but they've got to go and find somebody that can help Bryce Young develop in the right way, because I do think, again, he can be a viable quarterback in the NFL. His ceiling probably is not incredibly high, but I do think that he can be a good quarterback in the NFL.
But don't you think it was important that Peyton Manning, even if it was Mora, had him for 3 years? Like, think about, you brought up all the great quarterbacks. Of the greatest and of the ones that have been really good, how many of them have had coaching changes in their first year, right? Or have changed coaches or coordinators multiple times? And that's a list off the top of our head. We'd have to do research on that, but it's not very many.
Yeah.
Right. It's not very many. And so whether it's the right coach forever or not, that consistency is important. And they brought Frank Reich there for a reason. Now, was it the right reason? When we look at Frank Reich's quarterback history in Indianapolis and all that stuff, I don't know. And that maybe it was a mistake in the first place. Doug Peterson made sense because Doug Peterson's a quarterback guy, right? If you're drafting a young quarterback, have a quarterback guy be your head coach, period, full stop, or have someone around them that is, because you just have to help them for a couple of years transition into the league. And it like history shows us that this is the path. Look at Sam Bradford, Baker Mayfield, like some really good quarterbacks that kind of have stumbled through because they just have all these changes. And it's what I fear will happen to Justin Herbert, by the way. But like, you gotta let these guys have some consistency. Once they get a few years into the league, then it doesn't matter as much because your quarterback's going to be making a lot of the calls at the line anyway. But I don't know. It just seems odd to me to make that coaching change.
Do I think that Frank Reich is this quarterback whisperer and like a phenomenal coach in the NFL? I don't think so. So I want to be clear on that. I don't think he's like this incredible guru when it comes to quarterbacks. But when he was in Indianapolis, I mean, think about the quarterback instability that he had to manage his way through. Andrew Luck retires. Then they've got guys like Phillip Rivers and Jacoby Brissett and Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan. Like, they went through all these different quarterbacks in Frank Reich's era. So you want to talk about consistency in Carolina with Bryce Young. Frank Reich himself didn't get any consistency when it came to the quarterback position in Indianapolis. And now he doesn't even this guy has never gotten a chance as an NFL head coach to have consistency and longevity developing a quarterback. So I don't know if we'll ever know. I don't know if Frank Reich will ever get another chance to be an NFL head coach. I have no idea. Probably not.
He won't.
But we've never actually gotten a chance to see what he can do with the quarterback and develop them. It's never happened for him.
Carolina's next hire needs to 100% be about Bryce Young. Nothing else matters. And I'm just stunned at how often teams don't think this way when they have young quarterbacks. And look, it can work in different ways. DeMeco Ryans obviously is not a quarterback guy. He's a defensive guy. And it worked for Mike Tomlin early on. It can work in other ways, but if you're making that hire and you know it's Bryce, like, you have to make that hire with all you're concerned about being the quarterback there. It's what Jacksonville did, and they got it right. Go hire Eric Bieniemy.
I think that the bottom line is that Frank Reich wanted C.J. Stroud. There have been rumblings about that he wanted to draft C.J. Stroud and was overruled.
Oh my God, could you imagine how brutal that
and
would
then
be?
had to develop Bryce Young and then got fired because it wasn't working out.
And circumstances matter. You could switch each guy on their respective teams, and probably you'd have a little bit of regression to the mean in both cases. But
I think Bryce Young is going to be just fine. I think he's going to be okay. You got to get the right hire, though.
He's not going to be as good as C.J. Stroud, though. He's not. I mean, I'd be stunned at this point if he wasn't the third best quarterback in that class, maybe the fourth. I mean, I think Will Levis has looked better. 869-1240. We'll come back. We'll wrap up this. We got stuff on the network today to tell you about. We'll get you what's on tap next. All right, everybody. Can't get enough Chiefs content? Check out Fansided's Arrowhead Addict, a Kansas City Chiefs podcast, which is free on the Odyssey app. Follow Arrowhead Addict on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. We got Jim Rome coming up right after us here. Bob and Jeff, 2 to 4. Zach Gelb takes you until Shocker basketball against Richmond. 5:30 pregame coverage begins over on KEYN. You've got Butler basketball here on KFH tonight at 7:15. Tommy, enjoy the day.
Yeah, sounds great. Have a good Wednesday. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Jad, will need your policy choices on your presidential run tomorrow. For Jad Chambers, Tommy Castor, I'm Jacob Albracht. We'll see you then.